Carlton, oh my God, thank you so much for being here and for sharing
Thank you.
what is really just such a moving account of how this work really links with your identity, your legacy, your history. Just such a beautiful way, I think, to illustrate what I know is a centerpiece of your work. And let me start off by asking you this. If your granddaddy were here today, right now, right here, what do you think he would say to you about this work and this career pathway?
Wow. So, he told me, he said he didn't want me to be a lawyer. I think early on, he knew I had a gift of voice, and he said, just don't be a lawyer. So I'm not a lawyer, so I think he'd be happy.
All right. Well, I think he's smiling down on you right now. So you talked a little bit, sorry, shifting gears. I don't want to make you tear up any more than necessary. This work is already incredibly moving. So you talked a little bit about leadership being about love. And I think you really did a great job of articulating that pathway. Let me ask you a harder question around this and dig a little bit deeper. We have many leaders here in the room, many who work with our communities very closely. Why do you think leaders so often miss the mark around that really love-based and strengths-based perspective and engaging our communities in devising the very solutions and the very decisions that we're making that impact those communities? Why do we miss the mark?
I think it's about culture. You know, culture trumps art every day. You know, the culture is the thing that we practice. It's the thing that we live. It's the thing that actually lives in our bodies. It's the thing that when we get up in the morning, we automatically do the thing. It's the thing. That's the culture. And the culture that we've been immersed in as Americans, as in a capitalist framework, is based on a corporate structure. And so much of the work that we do in these organizations is defined by a corporate structure. It's kind of like this whole framework that I think Ella and Martin had the differences that people, relate to. Their differences are about the structures. It's about the structure of the church, which was very top down, very much, the women were over there, they played the role, but they weren't up here with the decision makers, which were in the pulpit. And Ella and that kind of pushed Ella to the outskirts because she wasn't a man of the cloth, and so her ideas and her vision wasn't held up the same way that others were. And I think that was that difference in culture and the way that they were trying to create a different way of living and being that I think Ella was trying to create, and I think she was really successful with the work she did through the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. But our organizations, these nonprofit models are just mini corporations. And so the entire structure that we work in around every day is built on the same models that are bringing so much inequity and pain to our communities. So it goes back to the culture. What is the culture that we're working on? This is the conversation we had in Montgomery, is like, what is the culture that you want to be at the core of the work of Youth Speaks? And if you can begin to shift that culture, then the structures around it would inevitably have to give way because the culture is going to trump everything.
Absolutely. Culture, that's the root of everything. That's been my leadership philosophy for some time. I had to learn that one in business school.
Wow.
That's what they say in business, is that really your success starts with the organizational culture that you build. And nonprofits are essentially one of the biggest business industries in this country.
Oh, absolutely.
So shifting gears a little bit, what's the opportunity? So almost everyone here in this room and at this conference has power and has influence. And I wonder, what's the opportunity as this field to come together and imagine a different kind of a culture?
Yeah, I think imagination is absolutely essential, but I think we know the culture. We leave the culture to practice a different culture, and I think that's the challenge is really looking back into traditional ways, looking back into the ways that people that came before us operated, the type of integrity, the type of practices that they had, and what can we borrow from those things that were some of the best, and then how do we innovate and imagine on top of that? But we have to have that solid foundation, which I don't think is not a lack of being imagined or created. They exist. It's in our bones. It's in the way, the story I was sharing about my grandfather. I have 1,000 of them. about him and others like him in the community that didn't go to leadership training school, they did this because the only way that they knew. They took care of each other because each other was all they had. They loved each other because that was the way that they were loved and brought into the world. So I think the culture is there. We have to remember and be reminded of those pieces of us that we've forgotten and that we've, in some cases, even abandoned.
I think that's so beautifully stated in that it gets back to this philosophy that the solution is within us.
Absolutely.
And it's about inquiry and getting to it, and how we move beyond that inquiry. I love that you gave us some very practical actions in terms of grounding ourselves in our communities that we're serving, having conversations with our grantees. You had some other advice there. What are some of the practices that you engage in your work to ensure that you are always grounded and embedded and are tied to those community-based solutions that are rooted in our culture and in our history?
Yeah, I think time is one of the biggest challenges, and we all feel rushed to get to a particular point to prove that what we're doing is effective and to show that we're having an impact. But the reality is that culture, the transforming of culture takes a long time. And so we have to be generous with ourselves in understanding that it's hard work, it's every day, and the progress is short, it's in small increments, but over time, that progress is much more difficult to retract once you achieve it. And so I think one of the things I would just offer is for us to be more generous with ourselves in terms of the time that it takes for change to happen. We want things to change today, now, like we want it to have been different yesterday, but the reality is that it didn't become this way overnight. We all know this, right? It didn't get this way overnight, and it's not going to go into a different place overnight. It's going to take a long time, but it's constant work that we have to stay at. And I think the biggest challenge that I think people have is that they want to see that vision. They want to meet the promised land in their own lifetime. And the reality is that we are living a continuum of lifetimes that connect us from the very beginning. And all we can do is do our part while we're here and hand over the next generation something that has been transformed because we didn't stop working. And I think we want to get there. And I'm clear that the change that I want to see in this world is more than likely not going to happen while I'm alive. But I owe the people, my children, my grandchildren, and those that are coming behind me to dedicate my life to making sure that eventually it will get there. But if we think that it's just going to get there because time will pass, that's not how change works. Things will change, but they may change for the worse. We have to be actively working all the time.
Thank you. So we have yes, thank you. So shifting gears now, we
Okay.
have some really great questions
All right.
and a lot of them, so we're going to try to get through them.
6.5
We're
minutes.
good. We are all good. So here's an interesting question. I love this one. So have you ever stumbled in your leadership and ended up causing harm?
All the time.
And how did
Absolutely.
you repair it?
Absolutely.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's part of the awareness.
If you ain't stumbling, you ain't trying. I think, I would say one of the examples is right here in the city of Baltimore. When I worked for Alternate Roots, we had our 35th anniversary, and part of that, was it 35th? I think it was the 35th. We did it with Baltimore, and we produced an event called Roots Fest 2011. And as part of that, we partnered with an organization called Culture Works. And in that partnership, we worked with them for about 5 years, about 2 years before the festival and 2 years after the festival. And they, as an organization, had approached us because they thought that we were the right fit to help them kind of figure out some community challenges. And in that work, they kept telling us that they didn't want to form this model of, they didn't want to be a nonprofit. They wanted to be community-centered and community-led. And the only way that we knew how to help was to put them in something that we could understand and recognize. And so there was this constant fight between, helping them. What we thought was building capacity was about getting the organizational structure together to be able to do it the way that we knew how to do it. But what they were actually saying is, no, we want to challenge the entire idea of what an organization is by seating the organization in the hearts and the communities of the people. And that was just huge. So when we finished, I think we're still doing work that has been influenced by our time in Baltimore. So the stumble leads you to understand, oh, okay, here's how we need to challenge our own thoughts. no organization has got it figured out. And if you haven't, reread your mission in 5 years, if you haven't, really if you have a strategic plan that is actually on paper, that is on a shelf somewhere, but it doesn't actually live in the body of your organization, or that you can't refer to it, or it's not tattered because you are in it all the time, then it probably is not the right strategic plan for your organization or your community. So I think there's so much to learn from stumbling. And I've done my fair share of falling.
Yeah, and that's really how you learn and grow as a leader. And if you're not, then what are you doing? I would say it's also interesting that you talk about trying to interpret a model in the way that you understand it. And isn't that what we're trying to do, is always come up with sort of innovative and different ways to approach these issues that we're addressing?
Yeah, innovation.
And being open. Innovation
is a very such an interesting word, because I think when it pertains to the work that I do, I can't speak for anybody else, but the work that I do as an artist, the innovations are already there. The innovations happened in my community 100 years ago. Like, when you're the descendant of enslaved populations, you're having to innovate every day as a means of survival. And so when you look back from that, and you look down the line so many years, and what we've done, what my community of African Americans in the South has done, is many ways integrate into the system that was forcing us to innovate. And so we lost the innovation. And so the innovation isn't about figuring out how to do it new. It's about remembering that we've already figured this problem out, that we just got to remember. So remembrance becomes the act of innovation. Right? And so this idea that innovation is always something new is actually a disservice to our ancestors.
Absolutely, and it's about reclaiming that identity as well as part of that remembering. So shifting gears a little bit, trying to get through these in the next 3 minutes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'll be quick.
Yeah, I can talk to you all day. Can't you just hear from Carlton all day? I know we ain't got all day though. So what other organizations do you look to as a model of effective leadership, or are there models out there that you look to?
I look to, I think one of my favorites is First Peoples Fund, which is a Native American centered and led organization in South Dakota. Their work is all about uplifting the traditions of Native communities around the country, and using those models as a form of teaching leadership. And I think that's one of the most impressive models that I've seen. I love Youth Speaks. It's one of the organizations that continues to inspire me. And Alternate Roots. I mean, I wasn't around when the organization was founded, but I think that it's an organization that too was ahead of its time. Because of the place that it was founded, it came into being with a lot of principles and integrity around equity and around voice and around non-hierarchical structures that a lot of arts organizations are still struggling with. Alternate Roots kind of was birthed out of those models, and so I think it was ahead of its time in terms of just being a leader in the arts community, and it continues to be that.
And that was like 20 years ago when they were
40.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were born 43 years ago.
Yeah, oh, wow. That's older than me.
Yeah, me too. Almost.
So I'm glad you brought up Alternate Roots. We have a question here around your leadership style. What did your leadership style or approach look like day to day at Alternate Roots?
I'm not a great manager. I know my shortcomings. I don't manage people well. I trust people, and I try to hire people and engage people that know their work and are capable and competent to do their work and work with a level of integrity that allows for me to do the work that I need to do in my position. So it's about bringing people together, always having shifting roles, so making sure that everyone has the ability to facilitate. It's about building leaders. It's about not feeling that this is my vision or this is my organization and it has to operate this way, but to recognize that I have some answers, I don't have all the answers, but collectively I bet we can find almost all the answers. And that giving that opportunity and creating the space for people to lead.
So, oh God, we got 3 more. Let's see if I can compile these. All right, so we do have questions around what white folks can do. Let's see. All right, my white allies and co-conspirators, I see you. Let's see, so how do we, as empathetic leaders in traditionally white, oppressive spaces, bring and stay in love-based leadership into these organizations?
I'm unequipped to answer that question. I think that that's a question that white people have to figure out for themselves.
Follow up. Come on now.
All right.
So how do people of color deal with the white savior complex when white folks' goal is to help, but their strategy is dehumanizing?
Yeah, I think, I think doing the best we can to lovingly bring them into awareness about what help. I mean, I think we have to define the help that we need. That's it. And we can't compromise or feel like we're giving up authority or empowerment in order to get the help, right? Like if the help is coming with strings, then it actually isn't help. If the help isn't creating the opportunity for us to, and I say us, and I don't mean black people, these and white, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying people who are interested in change. If the help comes with these strings that don't create more agency, like if we're helping in ways that don't leave the material conditions change for that community, that's not really help. And so I think we have to focus on how do we provide more for people to be empowered, not to give people power. We can't give anybody power. That's not in anybody's ability to give another person power. Everybody has power. The question is, how do we help people build agency to recognize and use their power? And I think that has to be the framework for all of our work. And if it's not, then you need to ask some questions about what your charge is and how you're enacting that in the world, because it's just another form of plantation politics.
Stepping into our power and how we're supporting one another through deep empathy and love. I like ending on that note. Yeah.
It's all about love. It's all about love.
It is all about love.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Love
you.
that we got this opportunity
Yes,
here today at the
yes,
Guild.
yes.
And thank you, everyone,
Thank
for
you.
being here.